man, it is good to finally make this work. It took ample tries, took a couple tries, but we're here. We are here. Yeah. So the main thing I feel like with this podcast, I feel like is just to make it as fluid as possible and just have our I mean, dude, we have the best conversations when we're training. Right. So now let's do it. We're doing live because you give me some, and you've been holding out on me on some stories. I have been. This man, but I got to tell people that this man right here has been purposely not talking to you during our session. So, well, now you're really hyped up. Oh yeah, what I haven't been telling you is, yeah, I want to know it all.
Start with Illumina, because Rui gave me some information on you about, Illumina. What did you do for Illumina?
Yeah, basically, so like these big tools that different biotech companies use to sequence DNA, it's a big fancy microscope, and then you put a chip inside that has something similar to a blood sample. It's like a blood sample, you process it, then you put it in this chip. It's got a chip of fluid in it with DNA, and that chip goes into this big machine, and then the machine reads what's on the chip. So what I worked on in Illumina is that chip and developing how things go in and out of it and how all the molecules
get... The chip itself,
gotcha. Right? And then I worked at a few other companies, Omniome, PacBio, developing and building the departments that then build that chip, right? So I started off as a scientist, and then I became a leader of other scientists.
And is it a touchy subject if I say, why did you leave? Or is it...
Oh, I'm very entrepreneurial, right? So Illumina is fantastic, extremely smart people. Okay. A lot of people I'm still in touch with today, really wonderful R&D team. I was really craving a smaller team where I could work on more of my own ideas, move a little bit faster, like you do in a small company, right? I wanted to focus more on that kind of work and wear more hats. At a large company, you're much more narrow in what you can work on typically. And in a small company, you can work on not just a lot of subjects, but in a lot of different departments. Like you can collaborate more with like human resources, finance, operations, manufacturing. You get a lot more of that.
That's the entrepreneurial
experience. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I spent, 7 years doing that kind of stuff. And then I moved and started my own company. And I couldn't have done that if I didn't go through the startup experience.
Interesting. So to go back to the quantum thing you were doing, what exactly I know a little bit about it, but like explain to like even people watching, like what exactly you're doing as far as that field. Cause they have the new quantum, Google has the new quantum computer, and like that absolutely fascinates me. I'm just like, blows my mind what they can do with that thing. That thing is awesome. So I would, when I hear quantum, I'm like, oh man, that's awesome.
Well, what I was doing is turning knobs. Okay, gotcha. I mean, that's like the actual reality of what a scientist does on a daily basis. It's not glamorous at all. You're just poking buttons and turning knobs. Okay. So for years, I was in a very dark room from very early in the morning, turning knobs to tune mirrors so that a whole bunch of lasers could all fire in just the right way to do some quantum operation. And what we were doing back then, it was a type of quantum. It wasn't quantum computing. It was called quantum communication. So the point was, could you take light and make it interact in such a way that then when you split the light to millions of miles apart, what you do with the light that gets to one side instantly affects the light that's, maybe millions of miles away. So that's called entanglement. So you do this really fancy operation with the I can't, I have to...
It's above your pay grade.
No, but it's these are...
It's hard to explain.
These are waves.
Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
They're electromagnetic waves, and you get the waves oscillating together in a certain way that when you move them really far apart, they're still connected. And nobody really understands how they're connected. They're just mathematically they are. And what you do on one side instantly is transported to the other side. It's not actual teleportation of physical things. It's teleportation of information.
And you just collect that data then.
And we would just, we would split it to opposite ends of our big lab, and then we would collect the data on both sides of the lab. And we're just looking for one particular signal that proves that we're seeing something that is not what's called classical. It's a quantum operation. We were just at the very core level. Like what they're doing now is way farther ahead of what I was doing 20 years ago.
What purpose though would that solve? Like as far as like someone paying you to do that, what would be the purpose of that?
Security is one of them, that you could basically send information and it's unhackable, that there's like no middleman that can actually intercept that information once you've distributed the kind of the keys that unlock the encrypted information. It's like unhackable. That mostly it's for security. When it comes to quantum computing, it's, you know, security could be part of it because it, you know, you can use a quantum computer to crack a code, but it's more about solving really hard math problems, because you can encode very complicated mathematical states in the electrons, and then through manipulating them in a certain way, you can get them to cool down and answer a mathematical question for you in one shot. Whereas a computer would have to go through all the possible iterations. A quantum computer just knows the answer when you're
instantaneously.
Instantly.
Yeah, that's
right.
crazy.
So it can go almost infinitely faster than a regular computer, but it has a lot of limitations.
Have we had that technology for a long time, or is that because I'm only hearing about it now, and I don't know if that's just because I'm being, you know, more
We've had it, but it's just moving really slowly. And that's because, so in the 1950s, the transistor was invented, right? It may have been in the tail end of the 40s, but like 40s, 50s, you got this first bulky transistor. And then from there to smaller and smaller transistors, and then to like semiconductors like we have now, that was just, you know, 10 years, 20 years to get there. And that's because transistors are really easy to model, to predict, and they're not super sensitive. So you can just make them smaller and smaller, and then they keep working. But in the quantum world, it's so sensitive that the tiniest little vibration anywhere, and it completely collapses what was quantum about the system. It's just very finicky. So the ability to make it like you walk away from your computer and you come back and the computer still works.
Yeah, you have to control the environment.
But with 20%. Quantum, it works for like a nanosecond, and that's it. And then like all the interference from your phone and everything just kills it.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's like exceptionally intricate, and the larger you grow your quantum computer, the quicker it collapses. And so it's really hard for the field to move forward and make ever more complex quantum computers, because every bit that you add to the system makes it that much more unstable.
But they are progressing in it because
but just much slower than with regular computers.
Yeah, no, I could see that. And did you hear about the Google computer? I think we talked about that. The Google computer, was it a Google computer? One of the computers, they tried to shut it down, and then it basically said no.
Oh, that was an AI.
Yeah, that was an AI.
That wasn't a quantum.
It wasn't a quantum computer. Okay, I'm different information, but that was crazy. And to go on to that, I mean, not that they're similar, but the AI part of it too is another part of science that I'm like, this is getting insane. We were talking about that earlier as far as like off camera, but how AI is getting to this point where it's like it's getting crazy good. And you said you've kind of toggled with ChatGPT, 4.0 or 4.5 or whatever it's at right now, but it's getting pretty nuts. Yeah. And I think that
that's going to move a lot quicker, I think, than quantum. But
for sure. You don't think that those are going to be any way you
linked?
Can use? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what
there's already
thinking.
Tons of papers being published of people doing AI quantum type of stuff, but it's
you would
just
think that
it's really just kind of gaining momentum. The thing with AI is that it's hitting a brick wall with energy, right? The amount of energy required to run these giant AI clusters is enormous. So, we try to extrapolate and we think, AI is just going to continue at this insane rate. But it's very possible that in the next couple of years, it's going to hit fundamental boundaries in physics.
I've heard that.
It just can't compute as much as it needs to compute to get to the next level.
But as far as the quantum realm, do we have that capability to just keep increasing, or is there a boundary for that as well?
I think we do, but I think you still just have the noise problem. shielding your quantum computer from all the noise of the world is just super hard.
And I've also heard that there's other stuff as far as like raw materials that we have, like earthly materials that we just don't have to go at the rate we've went from, even the 80s to now has been, we've used up, we only have a certain amount of elements on the periodic table. We don't have the earthly elements to expend at the rate we've been going, and we're kind of reaching a cap, and it's going to go much slower as the years progress on and on. Would you say that's true? Like, as far as us having the materials to advance at the rate we've been? I mean, you obviously know we went from thinking of like 80s, 90s, where we've gone from, like the leaps and bounds we've taken from then.
Yeah.
Is that a real thing? Like, oh, we're not going to keep progressing at that rate? Because right now I'm thinking like, oh, AI is going to be crazy in a couple years, and the quantum computer, we're going to solve out where we came from. We're going to find out our origins. We're going to do all this crazy stuff. But people are saying like, no, there's a cap to this. Like we only have so much material, so much things we can do, and the rate is going to slow. Is that a thing, or?
I don't necessarily think so. I think scaling things could hit that. So like EV cars, right? They use rare earth metals in the batteries, and that's become a political problem of like, where do you source these kinds of rare earth metals, and what countries? Very few countries that actually have those resources, but that's more of a problem of scaling it to everyone in the world.
Yeah.
What you're talking
like manufacturing.
You're talking more about like scientific progress.
Like, the actual intellectual part. Are we smart enough to keep that rate up where it's going to be like progress to this level where like, whoa, this is, what's it called? Terminator or something like that. Where it's like this.
That almost becomes an AI question.
Yeah.
Because when scientists have AI on their side to start predicting these things, the rate can increase quite dramatically. And we're making our own materials too. I mean, as a group, like the world of scientists, you take all the materials that are out there, but you're actually able to put them together in novel ways and make new kinds of materials. So I don't think it's that aspect of it is going to
limitless.
I think it's pretty limitless.
That's what I'm thinking too, because I've heard that there's boundaries, and I'm like, I don't think there really is.
There are boundaries, but you hit a limit and then you go around it. I mean, that's actually
we've done
the joy
that.
of science is finding those limits, and the Nobel Prizes often come for people that find limits on things, and then they figure out how to move around it.
Gotta love that, man. Yeah. That's the beauty of it. But the other questions I had for you was, because you already know, I mean, obviously we've talked about, theater and stuff, which you can dive into a little bit later, but my love for space, and you've really...
Space.
Yeah.
The final frontier.
Yes, dude. So give me a little background on like some of where you come from, and like, your experience with space.
My experience with space. Oh man, I've been there so many times. No, I haven't. No, that's a great question. So when I was a kid, I definitely thought, oh man, I want to explore space. I was watching Star Trek all the time, The Next Generation. And the idea of traveling through the stars was something phenomenal to me. And I remember, funny story actually, in high school, I saw a flyer for cosmology. And cosmology is the physics of space, basically, right?
The cosmos,
it's not quite astronomy is the study of where the stars are and the identities of stars and planets and stuff. Cosmology is more about like the deep physics of how gravity works and all that kind of stuff. And so I was really interested in learning that. So I took this flyer and I called them up, and this young girl answered. She's like, oh, are you interested in cosmetology?
Cosmetology.
And I'm
nice.
like, wait a second, that's not what I was interested in. Okay.
You immediately went, never mind.
So that's my filter. I'm like, I was 100% sure these were cosmology classes, but it was actually makeup classes.
That's hilarious.
I should have taken them.
That's a great story.
It would have helped me in theater.
That's the same thing with like what is it? As astronomy, it's what's the other one? With
astrophysics?
No, opposite. Okay. It's like the signs.
Oh, astrology.
Astrology.
Astrology is even closer than cosmetology.
Yeah, I agree. That one's funny though. That's a good story.
So my experience with space. So the thing I've been holding out on you.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this.
Is so my grandfather, my mother's father, also named Alex, like me. By the way, haven't introduced me. My name is Alex. Hi.
Yeah. What's your how do you pronounce your last name?
Nemiroski.
Nemiroski. Yeah. I looked it up on Google and I was like, holy shit, I'm gonna let him say this one.
Okay.
It's not that bad.
It's actually not that hard.
Yeah, it's not bad, but I didn't want to mispronounce it. Yeah, because mine's Gokenauer, so we're both. I'm Austrian and German, but is that Russian?
Yeah.
Yeah. But go ahead. Yeah. Because you said you held off on me on the grandfather thing, and you gave me a little bit, and then Rui told me a little bit, and I was like, oh man,
so
I can't wait.
My grandfather started off as an aeronautical engineer in the Soviet Union, USSR. So we're talking, like 1950s. And in the 60s, they started the Soviet space program. Yeah. And the Soviets were like way ahead of the US on this. And so the top, guy who was in charge of the new Soviet space program recruited my grandfather out of his previous job and made him the head of design for life support. So all the life support that was designed, when we talk life support, we're meaning the spacesuit, right? Was designed by my grandfather for the first man in space, for the second man in space, for the first woman in space, for the third man in space, and fourth and fifth, like all the first people
That's amazing.
In space.
Yeah.
Yuri Gagarin was the first man in space, and he was Russian. And my grandfather designed all of those spacesuits, and he was good friends with all of those first cosmonauts. We have signed portraits at home from Yuri Gagarin and others from that era. And I grew up, unfortunately, I never got to meet my grandfather because he passed away a few years before I was born. He never even made it to the US. And so I grew up with this memory of my grandfather, this really great man who enabled the survival, the safe return of about a dozen of the first people to touch space and come back and orbit around the world, and first spacewalk. That's a really interesting story. The first spacewalk, again, he designed the first suit that was going to be not just in a space capsule, but in space. Think of like a scuba diver, like an old-fashioned scuba diver.
That's amazing.
Spacewalk, what they didn't quite account for was the pressure difference. And when the cosmonaut was returning into the capsule, his spacesuit had ballooned to such an extent, because there's vacuum outside and there's pressure inside.
They didn't have depressurized chambers or nothing like that back in... Probably not.
Well, they did, but he had to still get through the opening, and he was too big to get through the opening. And so in the last second, he had to make an attempt to get through the opening by letting out all the air in his suit.
No way.
And so he basically had, however much he could, 30 seconds, 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes, to get back in and close it and repressurize and breathe again. And he had to just make a last second choice. I'm going to do this. And he did, and he survived. I mean, and this should be a Hollywood movie.
That's crazy.
But you could imagine the relief on the mission control, and particularly my grandfather, who had designed that suit. And the extraordinary amount of testing that they went through. And, if they would have lost this guy, that would have been tragic for many reasons.
That in itself is they
all survived.
That's crazy.
And so that's my personal connection to space. And all right, let me pause there. That was a long story. So
well, I mean, that's an amazing story. I mean, like, that in itself, though, like, those types of people to pioneer that and just go, let's see if it works. That is insane. That they could just go, let's try this. And, you could even speak to this. Do you know what they were trying, like, as far as like trials before is it water? They were going, we're gonna,
they were doing,
you're talking about that, the scuba diver.
They were doing water. Because why did they recruit my grandfather from aeronautical because they were using a lot of the same principles from high altitude, like fighter jets.
Gotcha.
Right. So inspired by those same suits, and they have to have oxygen and helmets and all that kind of stuff. So it's the same, basis set of technologies, but it had to be rethought and upgraded for a trip to space.
Interesting.
So, high altitude was one way of practicing.
But they just had to come up with random variables like, oh, this could
They had to anticipate things that no one had ever had experience with ever in the history of humanity.
That's so crazy.
And you can't really, high altitude is the closest you get to dipping your toe in, right? With something like scuba diving, deep scuba diving, you could always go a little deeper, a little deeper, a little deeper.
Of course.
But with high altitude, there's only so high you can go before
space,
wings, aeronautics doesn't hold a plane up. So you can only go so high. But if you actually want to get to outer space where, 0 G, there's only one way to do it, but to do it.
Do you know that if it's what is it, that the troposphere, or what is it, that the last tier of,
I don't remember.
I think it's something, I think it's the troposphere is the last one before you get to space. And I think we tried that many times, both the US and, Russia tried it, but you guys did it.
I'm born in the U.S. It's really,
hey, but your ancestors,
ancestors,
more so we did it as
we did
human
it as a
race.
humanity.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. Yeah,
that in itself is it's such an accomplishment, because I think that even what we got going on with the Mars thing and Elon and all that stuff, which obviously we can dive into, but it's that is nuts that they just went, let's try it.
Yeah.
Let's try it.
Well, I'll tell you something interesting. So, U.S., if you think about U.S. versus Russia over the last century, the dialogue is about U.S. is capitalism, Russia was communism. Now it's, centralized authoritarian. But the U.S. is known for startup culture and a lot of internal competition, survival of the fittest, right? That kind of Darwinian model. And Russia, at least historically, through the communism era, was known more for centralized thinking. And it's just two very different kinds of thinking, right? Centralized planning versus decentralized, more of competitive style. But when it came to the space and frankly, neither is the right system, right? There's always a right place and a wrong place to do one or the other. Yeah. A corporation, for example, is typically centralized. Thinking about the space program, it was actually the opposite. In the US, the space program was all super centralized and run by, it's not just NASA, but it was really vertically integrated and really run very top down with very long thinking mission, long-term missions that they were trying to go for. Whereas Russia just had a whole bunch of teams working on stuff. And sometimes there was duplication. You had multiple teams working on the same thing, and bunch of teams working on, I'm going to build this rocket, I'm going to build that rocket. And at the end, someone would choose which one wins and which one goes.
Was that strategic though? Whoever, we will come up with ideas faster.
It was the leadership style. Whoever was in charge of the space program, that was just their vision. That was their leadership style. They let all these departments compete against each other, and they were scrappy, and they would put together smaller missions let's get a man into space. Okay, let's get a man to circle the Earth. Okay, let's get a woman into space. Okay, let's get a man into space and then have him go out and spacewalk for a couple minutes and come back. So it was all very incremental in its thinking, and so they were able to make extraordinarily rapid progress. And the US was like this sleeping giant. That was slow to get into the space race, and realized at that point, we can't catch up. They're already so far ahead of us that what is the thing we're going to do that's going to wow everyone if we try to race them with first man in space and first man around, blah, blah, blah. Right. And we did those things, but we were always behind. The US was always behind. And so what did the US do? It said, let's think moonshot. That's where the word moonshot comes from, right? Let's think not one step ahead, but 10 steps ahead. Let's stop investing in these incremental little jumps.
Let's go through
and let's just go. Let's shoot for the moon. I mean, that's where all of these phrases come from, is that moment where the US was like, we can't onesie twosie this
we can't beat them with the small
We're just
goals,
going to have to go and do something absolutely impossible, and we're going to have to get a team 10 times bigger than any team they have, put all our best people on it, and just get there. And then by the time the U.S. already had made all this progress towards the moon landing, Russia was like so far behind on that goal because they weren't thinking about moon landing.
Yeah.
They were thinking incrementally. And eventually the whole Russian space program fell apart because once the U.S. landed on the moon, it was like game over.
Yeah.
You can't beat that. And so the U.S. lost. It's not the first man in space, not the first woman in space, not the first man around, not the first spacewalk. Like the U.S. lost all the early.
But they got the
trophies.
one that mattered.
Well, now we say it's the one that mattered, but yeah, they got the big one.
Yeah,
which was
for sure.
First,
I can
second,
see where
third,
they did
fourth,
that.
fifth, sixth man on the.
Yeah.
And at that point, the Soviet Union gave up, and there were plenty of other political and economic reasons why that happened.
Project Paperclip, baby.
Well,
that's what I told you about. Yeah. That's not just our
Germany.
doing.
That's Germany.
Yeah, that was through then the German scientists and engineers over there. But that we could go on. That's a whole podcast in itself. And I know, like, I definitely recommend that, like looking into Project Paperclip, because that was a huge thing, but that was in the space race. But I didn't know that Russia was so involved in these smaller goals. And then,
well, at the time, it didn't seem like a small goal.
No.
Right? But
like,
in retrospect, when you look at the moon landing, it's a small goal. But I mean, I think that because the Soviet Union is something in America that people don't spend a lot of time researching or thinking about. It's really relegated to some corners of history, but it's for any space buffs out there. It's really worth looking at what the Soviet Union did in the 60s in the space race and what lessons can be learned. Especially for modern startup culture. Like they were able to reach those incredible goals, and then the US took a very different approach. And both were successful, but in different ways.
Can you imagine if we were working together?
Oh my God.
We'd be on Mars.
Maybe one day we will work together.
Yeah,
I hope so.
I really hope so. I mean, I don't know what politics would. That's the funny thing, that the trivial stuff that's going on as far as like politics and stuff. We could be on other planets. We could be a binary culture easily by this time. I personally believe that, like, we could be on another planet right now and colonize. And there's multiple occasions where we have to. They're thinking about politics before they're thinking about something like, humanity as far as that goes. And, and I've done my research as far as like, colonizing Mars and the benefits of it and stuff like that. And, it's pretty interesting. Have you done any research on that?
I don't know if there's any benefits of it.
I mean, as far as like, not Mars itself, but the moon. The moon would be more of a beneficial just because of launching off of the moon to, go to other, star systems
so
or whatever.
NASA is planning a permanent moon base.
I've heard that.
That's going to happen soon. I was lucky enough to get to spend a little bit of time with a real live astronaut over the summer. I was on a like scientific panel at UCSD, and there was an astronaut there on the panel, and I got to know her a little bit. Like the whole group, we all went out to dinner afterwards, and she's just an incredibly lovely and wonderful human being. What I tell people is she's the closest that I could imagine to a Marvel superhero. The way she carries herself and the way she dresses, obviously. And when you talk to her, you're like, oh, this is what it would feel like to meet like Captain America. Yeah. There's just an otherworldliness, almost an alienness. Yeah. She spent a lot of time in space, but it's not directly because of that. Just the poise. I've never experienced anything like it. Yeah. She spent a year, I think, in space, 6 months, twice on the International Space Station. Yeah. And the stories she had, oh my gosh, like they could see sunrise every 45 minutes. Yeah. Every 45 minutes you'd go around.
You ever see that picture?
And you'd see the sunrise.
The picture, like, I think it's from Hubble, and it's us in the sunlight or whatever it's called, like the blue dot. Yeah. That picture, that is like insane perspective. And that's just a picture. And I look at it and I like go, wow, that's insane. Just us, that little blue dot in this beam of sunlight.
Yeah.
Imagine what she's thinking right now, like looking at everyone in the world right now. She is viewing everyone in the world in one picture.
I mean, I forget the name of it, but there's a term for the mindset shift that happens.
It's perspective, something perspective, but it's when you view the whole earth, and it changes all astronauts or whatever. It's like 100% everyone that's went up there.
I remember what she told me is, she's like, if we colonize Mars, the very first thing that's going to happen is secession. Like literally within a week, they'll secede. And I'm like, why? And she goes, well, it's because on the International Space Station, you get all the people from all different countries to come. And they're all like top of their class, extremely patriotic. You know, everyone is representing their country when they get there. And literally within a week, they are so bonded together by their shared experience of being in outer space. And they're so, you know, to some extent resentful of being lab rats because the mission control from their countries is telling them what to do 24/7. They're like it's a form of prison.
I've heard that mission control is like super bossy, and it's like,
And from a psychological standpoint, there couldn't be more disconnect between their experience up in space and the experience of basically mission control is viewing them literally like lab rats. And she's like, literally within a week, everyone is saying, you know, we just want to secede from this and be our own little collective.
That's awesome.
So,
and I think that's going to take that for us to bond as humanity. And I think that you have to have that perspective in order to see that this is nonsense. This is nonsense. And I really hope that this is then, you know, the next step in us going up and, you know, kind of, you know, going in that. I feel like humanity is on that right trajectory. It's just, we really need like someone to, I hope Elon does. I mean, I don't know your views on Elon. I think he's a cool ass dude. I think he's pretty outrageous in some of the stuff he does. It's pretty crazy, but I think he's on the right path, and he does see stuff that's like beyond, you know, just what's going on here on this little rock. Like, I feel like that's, you know, it takes someone to go like, dude, we're just on a rock floating through space. Like, you know,
the thing is, I look at what Elon is doing and I feel like whether I agree or disagree with any of his in particular things is irrelevant. I mean, he's one of the handful of people on this planet that are actually doing something.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I'm being a little dismissive. There's billions of people here actually doing something. Yeah. I'm actually doing something. You're actually we're all doing something, but he's doing things on a whole nother level, and he might break things. Or he might fix things, but I'm interested to see someone actually getting in there, rolling up their sleeves and saying, what can I actually do to improve the world? And I mean, just like startup culture, you can fail. You can roll up your sleeves and think you're doing the right thing and do all the wrong things. So we'll see how all this turns out. He's moving quickly and doing as they say in Silicon Valley, move fast and break things. So he's taking this very startup mentality to clean up the government, but it's an experiment. We'll see. It's a dangerous experiment, but I
you think he's going to get tied up in that though? Tied up in the government portion, like, because I see government and I see that this, because with my own perspective and my own research, I've just looked at it and I go, this is all so small in the grand scheme of things, like our country, their country, the tariffs, all this that's going on with Trump. And I go, Elon should just be doing, I don't know if he's looking at this so he can do more, or I don't know what his
I
ultimate,
can't speak to his motivations. But,
I'm thinking he's going to get tied up in the politics, when politics is so just small and minute compared to what we could, if he's focused and putting all he's a billionaire, man, he could be just, I mean, he's already done a lot with Starlink and getting but he could just be making so many more moves when it comes to, like, you know, moving us to a different planet, or like, you know, just aerospace in general. Like,
but it also, like, he surprises people, right? No one saw the Twitter thing coming. No one saw, he was a PayPal guy. No one saw him launch rockets, and you know, he has a plan. He has a vision, and that's not necessarily a good thing. A vision doesn't necessarily bring you to the best place, but he has a true vision, and unlike he's uniquely capable of actually executing on his vision. And agree or disagree, I respect him for that.
Yeah,
that is insanely difficult to have a global vision and go out there and against all odds to be able to actually execute on it and convince enough people to follow you and to do a thing. That is so hard.
Yeah. And I hope he really inspires other people. That's like my main thing with Elon is like, I think that him just being so transcending, he'll inspire others to be like, I want to be like Elon Musk. I want to change and change just the world in general. And you stop thinking about the perspective of like, I want to change the country. Because we have a lot of smart people on this planet. And I mean, you work with a lot of smart people, and I think that those people who go, I want to be like that. I want to be the next guy.
Well, I think Elon inspires people to do hard things.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, I don't want to say he's fearless, because no one is fearless. Yeah. And he, what he is good is dealing with his own fears.
Yeah.
And still moving forward.
Yeah.
But, that's what inspires me about him, is that he just takes on insanely difficult, nearly impossible things.
Yeah.
Or actually impossible things according to everyone else.
Yeah.
And then he goes and somehow against all odds actually makes it happen.
Yeah. Goes right around it. Yeah.
It's incredible.
And that part is the part I'm thinking is like, I think he'll, make people want to change and want to do bigger things. And, that's a really cool concept. But even with the people you work with, I mean, we were talking the other day about, just kind of like your flooring situation and stuff like that. I know this is a little different. Switch this.
We'll go from global to like,
your flooring guy,
putting floors into.
But you're flooring guy. But like, there's a lot of like, you're like talking about how scientists aren't getting paid nothing. They're getting, and do you think that's because there's a lot of smart people there's you can pay a lot of people, and this big company that's going to pay you, they're like, well, I can pay someone else less because there's so many scientists, there's so many engineers, there's a lot of smart people out there. And that's a big thing going on. I think that there's a lot of smart people that could really change the world. And even in your industry, I mean, we're definitely losing some trade like jobs, as far as like, like we were talking about the flooring, how you need new flooring, and they're charging, out the ass for flooring because there's no one that can do it, and they all are like supply and demand. We can charge this much because no one else will do it for a cheaper price. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of scientists out there right now, correct? Is it not a common thing?
There's a lot of scientists out there, and the economy in STEM, in science in general, is really bad right now. So there's a lot of people out of work. There's a lot of very talented, very smart, very experienced people that are struggling to get jobs in science. That wasn't the case even 3 years ago. And companies are losing money left and right. Venture capital has really put the brakes on investing early stage into scientific companies, because the risk is really high. It takes, 5 years, 8 years for an investor to get a return on their investment. So like, why invest in an early stage super risky company when you can put your money in a treasury account and get 5% stably every year?
Yeah.
Or put your money in the S&P 500 in the stock market and get 10 to 15% per year. So it's really rough out there right now for scientific companies, and therefore for scientists. And scientists are also not very good at advocating for themselves. We don't like to think about money. We like to think about science and bringing value and helping the world. And then when you think about putting a dollar figure on that, it makes a lot of people in technical fields very uncomfortable.
Yeah. You guys don't make as much as like people would think, oh, a scientist makes a shit ton of money, or an engineer makes this much.
It's really weird because it takes the most amount of specialized training, more than anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe doctors are the one exception of people that have very specialized training and are paid relatively well.
Yeah.
But scientists get extraordinary amount of training, extraordinary amount of specialization, and they're paid, entry level, mid level, like nothing special at all. For two reasons. One, they can't advocate for themselves. I already said that. And the second one is science is inherently uncertain. And people like to pay for certainty. You pay a lot of money to a doctor for the certainty that they're going to cure you. You pay a lot of money to a lawyer for the certainty that they're going to save you the $10 million or whatever you're being sued for. You pay a lot to your flooring guy or to the electrician for the certainty that they're going to finish on time, that it's going to be to code and ... right? But in science, there's so much uncertainty. You don't know how long a project is going to take because there's a lot of unknowns. So it could take 3 months, it could take 6 months, it could take 5 years. You don't, depending on how hard the project is. So it's really hard to pay scientists a lot of money and also have them come back to you and say, I don't know when I'm going to finish this. I don't know how long it's going to take. And so scientists get paid less because they can't promise certainty.
Interesting. So like even the innovation and the thought of, I could possibly change the world is not, that's, people aren't thinking of that. That's like the main thing.
Only in the case that a scientist is thoughtful enough to negotiate a contingency where they get like licensing, IP, or they have really good like equity stock in a company that they're working with, then maybe in 10 years they can make millions.
Yeah. They got royalties.
But that's the way to become a millionaire isn't, in 10 years, maybe I'll become a millionaire. Right.
Yeah.
Like, so
interesting.
Don't go to science if you want to be rich.
Well, I told you that. I was like,
science isn't the way to get rich.
If I was in a different life, I would have 100% went into the science route or done engineering or something of that sort.
You do that for yourself. You don't do that for the money.
And I feel like that's kind of what I've even gone down now is like, man.
Like the arts.
Yeah.
Art and science is a lot more similar than you think, right? Because they're both of those are, I wouldn't say, arts is a little different because it's even lower paid than science on the whole.
Yeah.
But it's also like you have to do it because you love it.
Yeah.
You don't become an actor because you want money.
Yeah.
Like the top 0.1% of actors make it in Hollywood and make money. Even the top Broadway actors aren't making a lot of money.
They're not. Yeah, they truly aren't.
I have friends on Broadway and they're barely making, $100,000 a year. And I'm talking, these are people at the absolute top of their field.
Yeah.
Your entry, your basic lawyer is making 3 times more than that. So,
yeah. Speaking of the Broadway, did you ever see that, who was the girl from the Pussycat Dolls that I saw in New York?
Nicole Scherzinger.
Oh my God. Is there any way to look that up and like see that? Have you seen it? Like
I haven't seen Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, Sunset Boulevard.
I haven't seen it yet. It's on my short list.
God,
I'm going to New York soon, so maybe I'll see it.
When, dude? You have to see that.
Maybe that's the next one.
Oh my God, she is.
See,
amazing.
I wouldn't pin you as you don't seem like the guy.
Okay, well, we've talked about this before.
Like
the tattoos,
Andrew Lloyd Webber, Sunset Boulevard.
Well, it was a great
and talk about it that way.
The production of it was great, and that's a lot of things. Is like people that don't, they kind of judge the book by the cover, but I definitely love, because there's so much that goes on in the production, and I, look at it and I go, man, there's so much value here, and there's so much production value, and there's a lot of time and effort and energy that goes into a Broadway play, and I love, that's something I take in my own life, that I, time, effort, and energy, I put that a lot to my own business. So when I see they just take care of every little detail, I'm like, man, this is good quality content right here. And Broadway does that. And especially, and I can see when they half-ass shit, and then when they she killed it. They put on all this, the production of it was crazy. If you ever, for the people out there, if you ever go see Sunset Boulevard, Broadway in New York,
no one saw this coming.
Yeah, no one saw
anyone who's listening to this podcast up until this moment, they're like, I did not.
They saw the cowboy hat and the tattoos. They were like, no, there's no way this guy's ever.
I did mention Broadway in the beginning, but
but we actually share a love for theater, and I remember seeing my first play in Poway, and I saw like Little Mermaid. And
was it Little Mermaid?
It was Little Mermaid.
Was it on the roller skates? Were they like skating around?
It wasn't on roller skates. It wasn't on roller skates, but it was done extremely well. And I remember even as it was a field trip when I was like in middle school, and I went, this was badass. Like I was thinking that as a little kid, and I thought I was always pretty popular and with the normal kids, and everyone else was like, this is lame, this and that. And I went, nah, this is dope.
Man,
like,
I needed a friend like you.
So
in high school.
cool. Like,
where were you in high school, man?
Yeah, bro. Like, I honestly thought, like, dude, you don't see the makeup changes and all this stuff. I was thinking of that detail in my head when I was in middle school, and I was like, this is super dope. I don't think you guys understand the time and effort. Dude, they're remembering their lines. Like, I can barely remember, like, fucking spelling shit. Like, they're remembering their lines in, like, you know, for an hour and a half play. And like,
dude, that's the best compliment to give an actor. Like, walk up to them after the show and be like, dude, you remembered your lines.
Yeah, literally, bro. Like, to me, that's astonishing, because I'm like, how did you do that? And then on top of all the other stuff, you know, with the dancing and the choreography, like, it's so awesome. And I just love, you know, plays. And I just think that, you know, I've been a little bit more critiquey. Like, I've actually seen plays that I don't like. I went off Broadway and I saw The Office, and I was like, I see why this is off Broadway. I see the difference for sure. And I see some of the actors where I'm like, oh, okay, you're good. Yeah. These other guys are kind of Joe Schmoes, but you're good. Like, you know, and I started kind of like being like, okay, I felt like a little bit of a critic, like, you know what I mean? But I definitely see the difference on Broadway, where it's like, man, this is legit. And I do love, you know, and that was funny that we talked about that, and we were like, man, we really, because I definitely don't look like I'm like, oh, you like Broadway shows.
It shocked me. I mean, for people that are listening and don't even realize, you're my trainer, you're my personal trainer.
Yeah.
And by the way, thank you for that. I came to you completely out of shape, and I feel like I'm close to the best shape of my life right now. So that's a plug for which Jordan's an incredible personal trainer.
Thank you guys.
But I mean, I've been doing theater since I was 5.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Dancing. I started off as a tap dancer.
Singing or no?
Singing.
Nice.
You know, singing, acting, tap dancing. All through high school, I could have totally used a friend like you to defend me.
I would have made it cool.
Because high school wasn't bad. In high school, theater was, you know, was fine. It was accepted, right? Like, people thought it was fine. In junior high school, that's when I was just relentlessly, mercilessly tormented for, you know, dancing and.
Which I don't know why people are so just.
And I remember, and this was back in the 90s when it was, you know, cool to call people gay or something like that. And I remember these guys would all be like, oh, you know, dancing, theater, whatever. What are you? That's so gay. That's so gay. And I wouldn't understand. I'm like, I don't understand. I'm in a dance class with all women, all girls. I'm surrounded by girls constantly. You're in the locker room with a bunch of dudes playing, you know, football or whatever. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Which one of us?
Someone explain to me.
Someone explain to me this, right?
Yeah.
But you know, that's all well and good. And funny enough, you meet those same people that give you a hard time in middle school later in life, and they're just like the nicest, sweetest people. Like everyone grows up to be normal and cool, but. I just always loved theater. I grew up in New Jersey. I traveled, you know, went to New York all the time watching Broadway, and it's been a lifelong passion of mine. I came to San Diego. I did tons of musical theater here. Same in Boston, where I went to grad school. There's something really special about Broadway. There's just nothing better. Even the Broadway tours, and like the people there are extremely talented, but there's something special about actually seeing it for real in New York on Broadway. Yeah. It's a whole nother level of hype
in the theater with the, you know, the old theater, and just, it is truly a vibe of just like the nostalgia plus, you know, whatever they added of the new like technology, as far as like, you know, even Sunset Boulevard had a screen, and just, you know, was that pyrotechnics of fire, and just, you're just like, wow, this is, you know, amazing. And I love that part of it. I think that's the part, is the details.
I was really like fortunate back in 2015. I just moved here for my first, you know, industry job, and I got a nice bonus. And so I decided I'm going to spend all this bonus on going back to New York and taking, you know, friends and going to see a Broadway show. And at the time, the hottest thing in Broadway was Hamilton. And, I got tickets like 6 months in advance and whatever. And it turned out that the original cast was leaving, which was, you know, traumatizing for everyone who was a big fan of the show. Yeah. But I was lucky enough to actually somehow the tickets I got happened to be like right on the last show.
Yeah.
I don't know how it happened, but somehow. So I'm at this last show, and it was the most religious experience I've ever been a part of.
Yeah.
Because the theater was packed with the diehardest fans, ton of A-list celebrities. I felt like I was at the Oscars, and I'm sitting there in like, I don't know, 9th or 10th row or something like that.
Oh, you had good ass seats.
We had good, yeah. Well, because I bought them like 6 months in advance before anyone knew that this was a especially special show.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and literally the whole audience is like crying for 2 hours straight, or 3 hours. However, the show is quite long, but it was, the energy is something I've never felt before that and never felt since, because it was Broadway stacked on top of the hottest show ever, stacked on top of the last performance of these just phenomenal powerhouses.
Yeah.
The original cast, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, the creator and star of the show. And you're just sitting there, and every second you're like, don't let this moment slip away, because it's the most ephemeral. Theater is ephemeral, but when you get to be there for a particularly special moment in time for theater, I'm sure the cast felt the same way. Don't let this moment slip away. But we in the audience were just, oh my gosh, when Lynn, the main character, walked out in the very beginning, he got like a 3-minute standing ovation. Like the show couldn't continue because everyone was clapping for this guy that just came out in the first like 30 seconds of the show.
That's so awesome.
So that's a throwback to Hamilton 10 years ago. I know it's not the hottest thing now as it was 10 years ago, but anyone who hasn't seen it.
I would encourage, even with that experience, your experience was, one of a kind.
I was the one guy sitting at Illumina doing my work and listening to the Hamilton soundtrack.
That's hilarious.
Going, in New York. I'm like, I'm in San Diego, but I'm dreaming of being in New York.
That's so awesome. But I think that anyone that's out there that, like I said, your experience was definitely something you would probably, a normal person wouldn't see at a regular Broadway show. No. But if you ever go see, even just a play in your local community, I'd highly recommend it, and you'd be pretty
I've done
amazed.
Community, theater here in San Diego, and it's great.
Yeah, it is pretty good.
The talent is fantastic, and it's local.
It's not Broadway, but it's definitely good.
It's not Broadway, but the reality is local theater is absolutely fantastic, and
that's how they start.
You get to see wonderful things close, and there are people that actually live in your community.
Yeah.
Some are professionals, and some are doctors and lawyers and scientists who happen
they definitely have jobs. All those guys have jobs for sure.
It doesn't pay very much.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. It's for the fun and love of it for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a huge thing that like people mistake for me as like, I'm like, dude, I love a lot of that stuff. And I feel like just, it's that same judge a book by its cover type of thing where I'm like, dude, I fucking love a lot. If it's interesting, like, why would you not be into it?
Yeah.
Like, there's so much that goes into it. That's why Broadway is so sick, because there's so much that goes into it. There's history, there's tons of time and small details that go into it. Science. It's science. It's the same thing. And I think that, if you're into intricate details and like, trying to, figure out problems and ways to display things like in Broadway, they're all kind of like the same. And I feel like if you're interested in that, you'd be into all the same exact stuff. And just because I'm into sports and I like a lot of I like football, and that's why I like fighting a lot. Fighting is like, it has a lot of history. It comes from different cultures. It has like all kinds of small details, and then it's on top of it happens to be like badass. Like that's like another cool thing. And but I feel like people mistake me for like, oh man, you're just jock guy. And I'm like, nah, dude, like fucking Broadway's sick. Like, why would I not think that's sick? Everything about it is cool.
Well, what I see in you is someone who really likes to understand the way things work.
Yeah, for sure.
You're seeing the gears in a clock.
Yeah.
And you look at Broadway and you see intention and craftsmanship. The same as you look at boxing and you see intention and strategy. Yeah. Right. It's not just two guys pummeling each other. It's very carefully. people spend months and months and months preparing for a fight, reviewing videos of their opponent and watching every single move and tailoring their strategy, and then teaching their body. It's not just intellectually, right? I mean, then you have to train and teach your body to adopt a new set of habits. So there's neuroplasticity. To train against this one specific opponent that has particular weaknesses that you're trying to train your body to, in a heartbeat, exploit, not intellectually, where you think, oh, they did a thing, now I have to counter. It's like, no, I need to train my body to instantly recognize that and go for that weakness that I've spent months preparing for.
That's the small details I love. Those about it.
Exactly. You like details.
Yeah. And I feel like Broadway and science do that for me, where I like, even at a young age, I was super interested in it, but I thought, I don't know if I'm like really love it. And then when I got into high school and I went, I remember Mr. Bird, if you ever watched this, Mr. Bird was my physics teacher, and I was really good at physics, but I was still in my like phase where, I'm not good at physics, but I was getting A's on things. I was helping people out with physics, and I was like, damn, I'm pretty good at physics. Like, I just love understanding the way, physics is the way the world works.
Did he tell you, did Mr. Bird tell you were good at it?
Yeah, he let me know, and he was like, dude, you're really good. Like, you could help your friends. And then I would help some of my football friends. And he goes, you ever like thought about like tutoring some of these people? And I was like, man, I get decent grades, but I'm not to tutor. Like, well, and
it wasn't your personality. It just wasn't your identity.
It was what the stigma was. Like, I was an athlete, like, and I felt that in my head. Now looking back at it, I was like, oh no, dude, you just love physics. Like, you loved understanding the way the world works, and, gravity, propulsion, and it came naturally to me because I was interested in it. I was super like intrigued by that, and I was almost shying away from it. And as I've gotten older, I've gone, no, dude, you actually like this. Like, this is something that interests you. Like, the fact that you're looking at YouTube videos and, peer reviewed articles of like what's going on in the world of aerospace, and like, I'm just like, that means you fucking like it, dude. Like, it's not just that like something that is just like, oh, that's kind of cool or whatever. I think there's some type of like a stigma to that, where you're like, nah, I'm not in that, because I'm into the world of athletes and training and stuff like that. And I've taken that into my training, as far as like, understanding the anatomy and physiology of clients and stuff like that, and getting into the details and stuff like that. And I go, if we do resistance from this way, blah, blah, blah. But I understand the physics behind it, because, I loved physics, and, going into college, that was like something that I was like, I really regret was I really wish I went into that field, because it was something I loved. And I thought, nah, we're not going to do that. Like, I'm an athlete. I'm going to go for, football, and, I'm on scholarship, this and that. But I do regret one thing. It's I wish I did something in that field, just because it's so just fun and like interesting to know how the world works, as far as like technically, and just down to the, atoms and, the small particles of everything. So
I think I figured out what your dream job is. It would be to be the first personal trainer on the moon. Not just because it's the moon, but because from a scientific perspective, that's not easy.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
I would have to account for a lot of variables.
Like 1/6 the gravity or something, but like
about 1/4.
It would be a lot harder to pump you up.
Yeah, I'd really have to, have some weight vests and stuff like that.
You'd have to come up with all new technology, which is what you're constantly thinking about anyway.
Yeah, I know.
Innovate in the gym.
Remember I said I wanted that scale too, that says all the different, planets.
How much you weigh
on all the planets.
All the different planets.
Yeah, that's an awesome scale. I wish I could have that.
What was our joke? It was like, oh, you want to lose weight?
You want to lose weight?
You didn't say you want to lose mass.
Yeah, you didn't want to lose mass.
Just go on to another planet and you've lost weight. There
you go. That would be a science joke for people are like, I don't get it.
I don't get it.
That's a good one. But that's it's definitely something that's helped me in personal training and even business, because there's I'm not really into psychology, but the brain and stuff like that, and it's helped me with sales and understanding like more so the intricate details of like everything, like you've said about entrepreneurship. It's definitely like something you have to take many hats and go like, well, I almost see myself as like a psychologist, because I'm understanding what people are thinking. Like if I was someone that wanted to buy something, what would I do?
Yeah.
If I was a personal trainer, what would I want to hear? And there's almost like this, like, learning certain different crafts and trades that I'm going to be a little bit good at this and good at this and good at this. That helps you be, and that's what an entrepreneur is. It's someone that's good at a lot of different things. And I can see why you went down that realm.
Yeah, you got to be good at a lot of things. You got to be infinitely curious. You got to not be put off by doing all the types of jobs that there are jobs that you don't like, but you still need to do them.
Yeah.
You don't like necessarily getting up early every morning and coming in and cleaning, but you got to do it.
I tell myself I do.
You tell there's the psychologist.
Yeah, they're right there. Yeah, and if you say it enough times,
you're Mr. 4 a.m.
I am.
Cold
I
plunge
am for sure. Cold plunge in the morning
every morning.
See, you need to get on that cold plunge every morning.
I do
nuts.
it, every couple of weeks, but you do it every morning. That's
every morning.
Whole nother level.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. If that thing is, I every night I turn it on and it's ready for me in the morning, 40 degrees,
oh my God,
ready to go.
That's nuts.
And I don't know if I've told you about it's the polar plunge. The
What's
one with
that?
the
Even colder?
Oscillating. It's constantly moving. It's got
it's just torture.
Yeah. No, well, because technically with a cold plunge,
I know you warm up, you build up a little layer.
Yeah, thermal barrier.
Yeah,
so you build up that thermal barrier, and in static water, of course. But
you're making
with
it
the
even
polar
harder.
Plunge, it circulates the water, so there's no polar barrier, and
just move around. That's a cheaper way of solving the problem. Just move around.
Just splash.
Just
splash
kind
a
of
little
jiggle.
bit. Yeah, no, I could see that. But if you don't want to splash, this particular item, polar plunge.
It's the poor man. It's the lazy. Well, that's actually the rich man's, because it's expensive.
Dude, it's way more expensive. It's like 10 grand.
It's the lazy man's.
And they're all not, they're all not cheap, but because did you even know that like ice baths and stuff like that, they're like 50 degrees, 55 degrees.
Yeah, they call it ice plunge, but there's nothing ice about it.
No, not at all. It doesn't even get, the ocean is like, or at least our ocean is 55, to 50 degrees. Or this is like 40 degrees. Like that's when sometimes if I put it at like 38, 37, like real cold, I'm feeling real frisky, I put it at that, and the top freezes. I actually have to
make sure
break.
You don't end up in an ice block. That's it.
Stuck.
There's no way out. You're Frosty the Snowman.
Yeah. But I literally have to, the top layer is frozen.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Interesting. The research on cold plunges is still very controversial, and I'm a huge fan, right? So I'm like, Andrew Huberman makes a big deal out of it, and a lot of others do. But they say that the benefits of cold plunge, it's not clear the right temperature. So it may not be that torturing yourself and going to 37 is any better than going to 55 from just a pure physiological perspective. There is the psychological perspective, though, of pushing yourself to do something uncomfortable and hard and surviving it and getting out of it. I'm not speaking to that. I'm just talking about just the pure physiological. It's not clear that going to such a low temperature is that helpful. But the most recent literature says that the peak effects after a cold plunge is 24 hours later.
Oh, yeah.
So right after it, your actually stress response goes up, and your inflammation might actually go a little bit up. But 24 hours later is when you get the
well, I feel the instant, there's, neo, or what is that, neuroepinephrine, and
the hormones flow.
And that is insane. That's like I stopped having coffee because I was like, dude, this is coffee times 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just immediate dopamine response of like, I am up and I'm ready to go. So it doesn't even matter what time it is. Yeah. Like you could literally just wake up, and if you jump in that thing, it works. Insane. Yeah.
It really works, but most people don't want to do it. It's torture. It's literally torturing yourself.
That's why I tell them, have you read the book? Yeah. Fuck. Who's it by? It's by this woman. She kills it. I'm like halfway through the book, but it's called Grit.
Angela Duckworth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it was written a while ago. But I'm halfway through it.
Yeah.
And man, that's a great book. I recommend people reading.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. And that is so like in tune with exactly what that is building that grit.
What is it like the formula? I think it's talent times effort squared or something like that.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think it was something like that where like effort counts extra.
Yeah, exactly. Literally.
It's like you could be talented, but you really have to try very hard.